Today is February 20th, 2025, what would have been Kurt Cobain's 58th birthday. To commemorate and honor the memory of my favorite guitarist of all time, I'll be showing you every piece of Nirvana gear that I currently own for my third annual complete Nirvana gear collection video 2025 edition. All my guitars, all my pedals, and my amps. We'll be starting with guitars, and I'll be going through them one by one in rough chronological order as to when Kurt used them. People often ask me how I got this guitar or that guitar, so this year I'll be going through when and where I got each guitar as we go through them. There's a lot to go over this year, so let's get right to it. Starting with the Bleach era. Before we get into the guitars, I'd like to go over my lone bass, my Ibanez Black Eagle. This is one of the reissues that Ibanez put out for the Black Eagle's 40th anniversary. This is the only bass that I currently or have ever owned, and I got it on eBay in 2018. Chris used Black Eagles throughout Nirvana's entire career, and he used one for the majority of the Bleach era. He's been quoted as saying that he used his first Black Eagle to record Bleach. I get a lot of requests for bass tone videos, and the reason I haven't done that yet is I don't own a bass amp. Whenever I use this bass, I'm using it through my 11-rack amp simulator. So I wouldn't have any like amp or pedal settings to show. I could show my 11-rack settings. I don't know how helpful that would be for most people. But if that's something you guys are into, let me know and I can start featuring this bass more through my 11-rack. Alright, so now let's get started with the guitars. What would be first up chronologically is, funny enough, the newest addition to my collection. My Chris Store Bleach Mustang. This was a surprise Christmas gift that I was not expecting. I got it Christmas 2024 from Chris of Chris Store and Tor. It was a joint gift between the two of them, and I'll never be able to thank you guys both enough. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you so much, Tor. This is Chris Store's beautiful replica of Kurt's first Fender guitar. And as usual, Chris went all out with the vinyl record pickguard, broken control plate, and the Soundgarden sticker. It originally had a DiMarzio humbucker with coil split, which sounded really awesome, but I have since modded it to have a vintage Unibox Phase 3 humbucker, and I turned the coil split switch into a kill switch. The vintage humbucker was a Part 2 Christmas gift from Tor, so thank you so much, Tor. I've been after the guitar sounds of Bleach for years. It's the reason why I bought my Fender Twin Reverb, and this guitar with this pickup has got me the closest I have ever gotten yet. Next up is my Stella Harmony H912. I got this through my really great friend John H. in 2023. He found it locally on Facebook Marketplace for a great price. Hit me up and was like, "Hey Eric, I found this Stella. Do you want me to pick it up for you and ship it to you?" And I was like, "Oh my god, man, yes." And after he picked it up, he went through the work of setting it up with the nylon strings to be Kurt accurate, so thank you so much, John. This is an H912 from the late 60s, the exact same model as Kurt's Stella, which he got in December of 1989 at a pawn shop for $31. We know this because, amazing enough, the original receipt still exists. This is what Kurt famously used for Polly and Something in the Way on Nevermind, and the Chaos 1990 solo acoustic performance where the much-loved version of Opinion comes from. It's also on In Utero and many of Kurt's home demos. This guitar was designed to have 12 steel strings, but Kurt had it with 5 nylon strings, missing the high E. I have mine set up the same exact way. This is said to have been his main songwriting guitar, but we can only begin to imagine how many Nirvana songs were written on Kurt's Stella. There are different variations of the H912. There are some with different headstock logos, but mine is exactly as Kurt's was. The only way I could get any closer is if I played his actual Stella. It's got a very dry, sparse, and haunting sound. It's very unique, and I'm very happy to have this guitar. We're now getting to the tail end of the Bleach era with my Epiphone ET270. This is a 1971, and it was made in Japan. This was a birthday present from my parents in 2022. Thank you, Mom and Dad. They purchased it online from a local music store in Pennsylvania, I think. I honestly don't remember. This is the same exact model that Kurt Cobain used heavily from January 1990 to April 1990. You could say this was his main guitar in that time period. It was presumably used at the Smart Sessions of April 1990. At the time, the band thought they were recording their second Sub Pop album, but then Chad Channing left the band not long after that. So those songs went on to become the Nevermind demos. This is easily in the top 3 of my entire collection. I think it's the most underrated Nirvana guitar, as I've said in several previous videos. This is definitely one of the ones I play the most, and this is like the hidden gem of Kurt Cobain guitars. We are now onto the Nevermind era, where currently most of the guitar collection falls into. First up is my case Strat. This is the first part caster that I put together 100% by myself back in the summer of 2023. It's made up of a Squier body, Mexican Fender neck, Seymour Duncan 59B, And originally it had Tex-Mex single coils, but now both single coils are the leftovers from my vintage Japanese Strats. The neck pickup is from my Vandalism Strat, and the middle pickup is from my VMA Strat. So this guitar is a true amalgamation of many parts, which I think makes it pretty unique because it has the modern 59B, but then it does have the vintage 90s single coils from different Kurt guitars, but still vintage Japanese single coils. This is my build of Kurt's first Fender Stratocaster. He first used his in October of 1990 and presumably last used it at the Jabberjaw show in May of 91 that happened the day after the Nevermind sessions ended. We'd never see this guitar again after that show. It's heavily speculated that it was stolen that night. It's all speculation, of course, and anyone's guess unless you were physically there, but I've always believed that Nevermind sounds like a very Strat-heavy album. The timeline suggests that he would have had his K-Strat with him while they were recording at Sound City. Stratocasters are now my favorite guitar model, and the K-Strat and the Vandalism Strat are tied at #1 for my favorite Kurt Strats. And now for the only guitar that we have concrete photo proof as to have been used on Nevermind, the Tom Strat. And Tom stands for Tune-O-Matic, which is the type of bridge that's on this guitar. This is a partcaster that was made and completely set up by my tech Jeff of Lomic Guitars back in the summer of 2024. This is a setup I've always wanted, but a stop tail bridge and a Tune-O-Matic on a Strat is very unusual and it's not an easy setup at all. So this is one I would never tackle myself, so thank you so much Jeff for putting this together so beautifully. It's got a Squire body, a blank Mighty Mite Stratocaster neck, a Seymour Duncan distortion, it's a modern one that I scratched the logo off of, and Tex-Mex single coils. These are the Tex-Mex that were originally in my K-Strat. And of course, the Godo Tune-O-Matic and the stop tail bridge. This is my build of the Strat that Kurt used in many different forms from March 91 all the way to June 92. Like I mentioned previously, it's the only electric guitar that we can say with 100% certainty was used on Nevermind because we have this photo. It was smashed in studio during the recording of Endless Nameless, which came off of a failed take of Lithium. As mentioned, it went through many different forms, but mine specifically is modeled after my favorite form, the August 1991 Roxy show. At the time of me recording this video, that show currently has the most high quality and close-up photos of the Tom Strat to date. And now for one of the pride and joys of my collection, my 1-for-1 Vandalism Strat. An accurate recreation of Kurt's famous Stratocaster as it was in the summer of 1991. Just like Kurt's, mine is either a 1989 or 1990 Japanese ST362 Stratocaster. It has its stock single coils, a 90s Seymour Duncan 59N in the bridge position, an HSS pickguard that still has the bridge's single coil screw holes, and a paper Vandalism Strat sticker from Chris Store. Literally the only thing that is off about this guitar is that it is right-handed. Other than that, it's as close as I can get. I got it for a really great price used on GuitarCenter.com in the summer of 2024 because they had mislabeled it. They thought they had an 80s contemporary Stratocaster, but I took one look at the headstock and I was like, no, I'm pretty sure that's an ST362. I took a chance on it and bought it, but I never saw it stock. I had it shipped straight to Jeff. And right away, he looked at the neck stamp and I was correct. It's an ST362. Jeff then did all the mods, including routing it for a humbucker to bring this guitar to full vandalism mode. I really can't say how proud I am to own such an accurate replica of one of the most famous Nirvana guitars, and probably one of the most recognizable Fender Stratocasters just in general. What's ironic is for how well known it is, it didn't last very long. Kurt only used it for 6 months, from June 91 to December 91. Kurt's went through 3 different forms, and mine is modeled after its stock Fender neck form as it was at Reading 91. Kurt's eventually got a Fernandez replacement neck in the fall of 91, and then a blank Kramer replacement neck in the winter of 91. And that is a great segue to the next guitar, my Paradiso Vandalism Strat. This is a Chris Store Vandalism Strat, originally his Paramount edition. This is how I received it with the Seymour Duncan 59N in April of 2023. I kept it that way until October 2024 when I modeled it after the Paradiso show. I got a blank 80s Japanese Kramer neck and Fender Ventera 60s single coils. Of all the modern single coils that I have tried, the 60s Ventera by far gets the closest to my 362 Vandalism Strat. As always, Chris goes above and beyond with the damage and the relicking. Every time I look at this guitar, I think this should be in a museum, not my music room. He even sent me an updated Paradiso sticker while I was modding this guitar. It's very fun to have before and after clean/damaged Vandalism Strat brothers. Because of how rare and accurate my 362 Vandalism Strat is, that's never one I would play out. That's one I'm keeping at home for videos and for recording, but I would definitely bring this Vandalism Strat out to the stage. Let's continue now with another very well-known and loved Kurt Cobain guitar, his Fender Jaguar. This is my Fender road-worn Kurt Cobain signature Jaguar, which I got for my 18th birthday in 2011. My parents pre-ordered it directly from Fender not too long after the model was initially announced, so I like to believe that's part of the first batch that Fender originally released back in 2011 for Nevermind's 20th anniversary. People like to rag on this model, but I've always really loved it. While in recent years my taste has moved more towards Stratocasters, this Jaguar will always be very special as it was hands down my most used guitar in my band Ithamid in my teenage years. I played many shows with this one and used this a lot on our recording. This of course goes without saying, it's Fender's signature model of Kurt's iconic Jaguar, one of the most loved guitars among the fans and one of his most used. First seen in June of 91 and last seen in August of 93. It's debatable whether or not it was used on Nevermind, but it was used on In Utero, and of course many iconic Nevermind era performances. And now what I've always considered to be the star of my collection, my Fender Competition Mustang. Visually, it really can't get any better than this when it comes to Nirvana guitars. Kurt is first seen with his in September of 91 and last seen in April of 93. It was not used live very much, but it was used on Nevermind, In Utero, and of course, the Smells Like Teen Spirit music video. This guitar was my wife's wedding present to me in 2017. The initial paint job was not well done and very rough, but I loved it nonetheless for many years. But for my 30th birthday, my wife got it professionally repainted, so it finally has the look that a Nirvana Competition Mustang deserves. Along with the repaint, we had Jeff install the Tune-O-Matic bridge and the 80s Seymour Duncan hot rails, and Jeff went all out and put a coil split for the hot rails. So when the bridge pickup selector is on the up position, it's in single coil mode. So I now get Nevermind-like studio tones, but when it's in the down position, it's the full hot rails that sound a lot more like In Utero. I received this guitar in its reborn state literally 1 week before I flew out to the Jim Irsay collection in Indianapolis to document, measure, and hold Kurt Cobain's actual Fender Competition Mustang, the most expensive electric guitar in the world after it sold for $4.6 million in 2022. So this guitar is very special to me for many different reasons. Visually, it's extremely gorgeous. It brings me back to 2017 when I first got married, and also brings me back to the excitement of getting ready to go see the actual Competition Mustang. And now onto my third and final Chris Store guitar, my Courtney Telecaster. I received this from Chris in May of 2024. It is his beautiful replica of the only Telecaster Kurt Cobain ever played on stage. He used it kind of sporadically throughout 1992, but it was used pretty consistently early in the year on the Pacific Rim Tour. On that tour, it was completely stock, but after it got Seymour Duncan hot rails, and that's how it was used in the summer of 92 in Europe. It would go on to get smashed in Sao Paulo, Brazil in January of 93. I put out many videos of it while it was stock as I received it from Chris, but then in June of that year, I did a few modifications to it. I switched out the neck to be a Fender Telecaster neck, and also switched out the pickups to be Fender Ventera 50s Telecaster single coils. I really like hot rails, don't get me wrong, but I already have two other guitars with hot rails that I love, and I really wanted to go after the stock Tele sound that Kurt had in early 92. I think it's one of the most unique live tones that Kurt ever had. It's twangy and bright, but Kurt still found a way to make it heavy and big. We are now at the end of the Nevermind era and at my final Stratocaster, my VMA Strat. This is a Japanese 1996 ST62 Stratocaster. I originally had a VMA Partcaster that I put together and that I really liked. I wasn't planning on ever replacing it or anything, but then this guitar popped up locally for an amazing price on Facebook Marketplace. I saw the headstock, I saw the color, and I was like, I need to go out and get this thing. That was back in July of 2024, and the price was so good, I was driving out to get it the next day after I found the listing. I've modded it to be as close as possible to Kurt's VMA Strat. It has the leftover 1-ply 8-hole pickguard from my ST362 Vandalism Strat, and a 90s Seymour Duncan hot rails with no logo and the black wrapping. I confirmed that this is just about as close as I can get by comparing it side by side with the remains of the actual VMA Stratocaster. It was so crazy to see in person how the necks and the body color specifically matched so perfectly. I never thought I would ever be able to say this, but this guitar has quote unquote met the actual guitar that it is modeled after. It was literally centimeters away from it with no glass in between. Kurt used his VMA Strat from February 92 to October 92, where it was smashed for the final time in Argentina. But of course, the guitar will always be associated with, and where its nickname came from, are the 1992 VMAs, where he used it for an extremely memorable and energetic performance of Lithium. These 90s Japanese Strats really are something else. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I really can't say how much I love everything about this one and my 362 Vandalism Strat. These are the guitars that made Stratocasters my favorite guitar model. And now on to In Utero, my personal favorite Nirvana era. First up is my Roseland Jagstang, and this is where it all started. This was my very first Fender and my first Nirvana guitar. It's from the original first run of the Jagstang. It's a 1995 and was made in Japan. I got it off Craigslist in 2011 for $500. I remember at the time being really sad that I wasn't able to talk down the seller to $450, but nowadays, looking back, that price was an absolute steal compared to what Nirvana guitars go for now. I have absolutely no regrets paying $500 for this guitar. After the Jaguar, this was my most used guitar in my band. It saw lots of use and got lots of love in my teenage gigging days. I had it in semi-orange stang mode for a long time with a Seymour Duncan JB, and then for a little bit I had a Seymour Duncan Invader in it. But in October of 2022, I took the plunge and went full Roseland with it. I installed a genuine red tortoiseshell pickguard and Seymour Duncan JB Jr. I personally love the red on red look a lot more than the orange stang look. Even after all the additions to the collection since 2011, this is still the most comfortable neck I have ever owned. When I played Kurt's actual Skystang 1, the feel of that neck immediately reminded me of my red Jagstang here at home. So not only are there a lot of show and recording memories in this guitar, but now when I play it, it reminds me of how Kurt's Skystang felt. This next one, along with my Comp Stang, is another star of my collection, one that I'm constantly looking at and thinking, is this thing real? Do I actually own this? This is my D18E Unplugged build, modeled, of course, after Kurt's Martin guitar that he used on Unplugged. It is currently the most expensive guitar in the world after it sold for $6 million. Kurt is first seen with his Martin in September of 93 and then last seen in February of 94. So although he didn't use it for that long in the big picture, this is always a guitar that will be tied to him and one that will always be associated with him thanks to the legendary Unplugged performance. This started out as a Sigma DM3, which I got used on GuitarCenter.com in September of 2022. I get a lot of people that comment things like, LOL, Sigma, why wouldn't you just use an actual Martin? I'm really happy that now in 2025, this build is one that a lot of people have now done. But back in 2022, when I was originally researching the parts that would be needed for this build, I could only find literally 2 examples of people who have done this in the past. And I found some horror stories of people who tried to install these pickups and just ended up ruining their guitar. So at the time, I didn't even know if this was possible, if this was going to work and be a functioning guitar that actually sounded good. So there's no way that at that time that I was going to drop Martin money on an actual D18 for what essentially was just a big science experiment. And Sigma was originally owned by Martin. When this guitar was put out, Sigma was to Martin as Epiphone is to Gibson. So this is basically just a budget Martin made by subsidiary of Martin. So to all you LOL Sigma kids out there, this is why I used a DM3. I spent a lot of time looking for these parts, and particularly it took a really long time to find a vintage Bartolini 3AV with the clear brackets. I searched daily for 6 months. I'm not even joking. Probably seems a little ridiculous and weird now because now there are companies that do make these brackets, but at the time there weren't any, and I contacted Bartolini directly. And the response I got was, oh, about those brackets? Yeah, I'm sorry, we're not making those anymore and there's no plans to make them. When I finally had all the parts that I needed, I sent everything over to Jeff and he completed this build masterfully in March of 2023. With this, I've gotten as close as I believe I can to Kurt's Unplugged tone, a sound that had a huge impact on me growing up and still to this day. I still can't believe that I can get that sound with this guitar. This one is truly a dream build. We are now finally at my #1 favorite Nirvana guitar that I own. My 2012 Fender Kurt Cobain Signature Mustang that has been extensively modded to be as close as possible to Kurt's Skystang 1. That was Kurt's #1 for Nirvana's final 2 tours, the guitar he played the most by a long shot. Most fans recognize and know this guitar from Live and Loud, but it was used at nearly every show on the In Utero tour, and it was used at the final Nirvana show. The first appearance was the first date of the tour in October 93, and the final appearance was at that final show in March of 94. I originally got this model on eBay back in 2014 for $700. I remember really eagerly saving up for it. I was working a retail job at the time, and I used my big Black Friday paycheck after a 12-hour shift to finally purchase this guitar. It was listed as refurbished, but it was actually brand new. The original pickguard still had the plastic cover on it, and it had all the tags attached to it. I kept it stock for around 10 years, and I played it that way with my band because I was worried about ruining this guitar's value. Because when Fender stopped producing the Kurt Cobain Mustang in 2014, prices quickly shot up. Then in June of 2022, it hit me that, hey, this is a guitar I am never going to sell. So I shouldn't prioritize its value. I should prioritize how happy I am with it. That's when I had the initial Skystang 1 mods done, and this is how it looked back then. White JB, white single coil cover, and white pickup switches. The pickup switches were originally uncut. I had no plans to shave them down, but then I had my surreal day of documenting, holding, and playing the actual Skystang 1. To have Nirvana guitar tech Ernie Bailey hand me that guitar while Julian's Auctions and Chad Cobain were all giving me permission to play it, oh my god, it's something I will never ever forget and is definitely a life highlight. I look back and I still can't believe that happened. After this experience, I could not stop thinking about how I wanted my Skystang back at home to look just like Kurt Skystang did as it was in my lap as I played radio-friendly unit shifter on it. I sent Jeff high-quality close-up photos that I took of the pickguard, and he began working on the low-mix Skystang 1 replica pickguard. This is hands down the most accurate Nirvana pickguard that has ever been produced. I say that as someone who had the actual Skystang pickguard inches away from my face with no glass in between. Along with the custom pickguard, I asked Jeff to do the full European mods to my Skystang, shaving down the pickup switches and adding damage to the JB and pickguard mounting it. This is a dream come true guitar that brings me straight back to that day when I had Kurt's guitar in my hands. And now onto the other coolest in Utero Tour guitar, my build of Pat Smear's Hagstrom H2N. This is the coolest part caster that I have and probably will ever have. This one is really hard to beat. It's an H2N parts build that is modeled after Pat Smear's Nirvana specs. Pat's original red Hagstrom is one of the coolest guitars in rock, period. It was first used at the final Germ show, it was his main Nirvana guitar, and it was most likely used in the beginning of the Foo Fighters. You will not be able to find another guitar in punk rock with that level of pedigree, I can guarantee it. There had been no trace of Pat's Hagstrom for 30 years, since '94 until earlier this year at the Nirvana surprise reunion set at Fire Aid. I immediately got in touch with Pat's tech and my friend John W. Hey, was that Pat's original red Hagstrom that he was using on Territorial Pissings? And John said to me, yes, that was his original Hagstrom from the 70s. I set it up and repaired it for that performance. So amazing to see this piece of history back in action. My build started out as a Hagstrom F20T, but it got completely reworked. I sent this guitar to Jeff along with the vintage 70s cherry red Hagstrom H2N neck, Seymour Duncan JB and Seymour Duncan 59, a Godot 2-pneumatic bridge, and gold knobs. Jeff made the custom pickguard and assembled and set up this beautiful instrument in June of 2024. It's one of the ones that I gravitate to the most. And what you're seeing right now is actually this guitar's second pickguard. Thanks to John, I was able to get my first original one signed by Pat, the man himself. I've got the original pickguard frame now, and it's just so surreal. We are now on to my High Flyer. This is my Eastwood Phase 4 High Flyer, their faithful replica of the High Flyer that Kurt used in the Heart-Shaped Box music video. According to LiveNirvana.com, Kurt only used this High Flyer once live on October 21st, 1993. I got mine back in 2013 when Eastwood originally started offering this model. It looks like it was discontinued for many years, but they have recently started selling these again. While technically an In Utero era guitar, thanks to the music video and its one performance, I've always used this guitar for bleach and pre-bleach tone. It gets super close to those tones and was always my go-to for that time period until recently when I got my Chris Store bleach Mustang, and especially after I put the Univox humbucker in it. Nonetheless, I still love this guitar. It's one that I've had and bonded with for a very long time. I've always toyed around with the idea of replacing the pickups with actual Univox humbuckers, and that's something I still want to do one day. Last up for the guitars, but definitely not least, my build of the prototype Jagstang that Kurt Cobain used on the In Utero tour. A guitar that's surrounded in controversy as there are still people who try to put the outdated myth that Kurt hated his Jagstang. If you look at the numbers, he used his Jagstang quite a bit, especially compared to the other Stangs outside of Skystang 1. I highly doubt that Kurt Cobain, who in 93 and 94 could play any guitar he wanted in the world, would use a guitar this much if he really hated it as much as those people like to say. It is a pretty out there and unconventional body shape, so I can't help but think these people are projecting. They just personally don't like the shape. And then for some reason they want to have Kurt on their side, so they say Kurt hated it too. I don't know, but all the evidence and quotes and footage we have completely suggests otherwise. I firmly believe that Kurt Cobain did not hate his Fender Jag Sting. He was first seen with his on December 1st, 1993, and it was last seen at Nirvana's second to last show on February 27th, 1994. Mine is a 2021 made in Mexico Fender Jag Sting that I ordered not too long after that run was announced. I demoed it while it was stock, but the plan the entire time was to completely mod it to be as close to Kurt's as possible. I changed just about everything you can change on this guitar aside from the neck. Custom 1-ply pickguard, Seymour Duncan 59, Fender Texas Special bridge pickup in the neck position, Godo 2-pneumatic bridge, and Godo tuners. Kurt's Jag Sting is probably my second favorite guitar overall that he played. I think it's definitely one of his coolest overall, despite the controversy around it, and I'm very happy to have an accurate build of it. So now that we have gone through the guitars, it's time to go through the pedals. This is my unnecessarily and borderline ridiculous huge Nirvana pedal board that I call my channel board. I use this for all my tone recreations and for all my content. I have a much smaller and much more reasonable personal board that I use when I'm not doing content. But I'm going to break down my channel board now, and I'm going to go in the order of my signal flow. First up is my Arion Stage Tuner, the only tuner pedal that Kurt is known to have used on stage. Used throughout the Bleach era and up until October 1990. Digitech drop tune. Obviously one that Kurt never used, but it's very convenient for changing tunings with a click of a button. From here on, I have my pedals kind of grouped together by category, so now we're on to the modulation pedals. First up is my 90s Electro-Harmonix small clone. This is the first pedal I ever bought. The chorus pedal that Kurt is first seen with in January of 1991, and then after that, it never leaves his feet. A pedal he is heavily associated with thanks to songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit, Come As You Are, and Drain You, just to name a few. After that is my Past Effects Kurt's Cologne. Easily my favorite chorus pedal now. With the click of its decade switch, you can go between 3 different decades of small clone sounds. 70s, 80s, and 90s. This is truly an incredible pedal. I like to leave my actual small clone set to the late 91 sound, like the very wobbly Paramount sound, but then I use my Kurt's Cologne for all other small clone applications, primarily for the small clone sound that Kurt had during the In Utero tour. I'm gonna group the next two together, my Dandy Horse Echo Flanger clone and my 90s Stereo Electro-Harmonix Polychorus reissue. The Dandy Horse build is a clone of the original vintage Echo Flanger and Polychoruses that Kurt used, and it 100% gets his sounds. The Stereo Polychorus has always gotten really close in my opinion with my setup, but just not all the way for songs like Radio Friendly Unit Shifter and Scentless Apprentice. Though I've always thought that it does nail the live heart-shaped box solo sound. I got this pedal back in I think I want to say 2012 or 2013. It actually has a lot of sentimental value because I remember telling my best friend Jack, man, I dream of owning a Polychorus because of Kurt Cobain, but they're so expensive, I'll probably never have one. Then a few days later, Jack says, hey, I bought a Polychorus on eBay for you because I know how much you want one, just pay me back whenever you can. So I paid him back the $250 that he had spent to buy this pedal, which at the time I thought was a huge splurge. And I was like, man, I'm so happy to own this pedal, but wow, so much money for a pedal. And I laugh looking back now because nowadays these pedals go for insane prices. So I just happened to get mine at the right time, so thank you so much, Jack, for pushing me over the edge. So I keep my Polychorus set for the heart-shaped box solo, and I use my Echo Flanger clone to switch between the radio-friendly Unit Shifter and Scentless Apprentice sounds. Now we're on to my ridiculously long line of distortion pedals. Here we go. First up, Boss DS2, probably the distortion pedal that I would say Kurt is most associated with, thanks to all the Nevermind era shows like Paramount, Ready 92. He's first seen with the DS2 in September of 91, and just like the small clone, it's a pedal that will never leave his feet after that. My 1992 Boss DS1, the distortion pedal Kurt very famously used on Bleach and Nevermind. He also used it for almost the entirety of the Bleach era and the very beginning of the Nevermind era. First used in June of 1987 and last seen on September 25th, 1991. After that, I have my Nirvana New Wave. This is their clone of the Unibox Square Wave Fuzz that Kurt had with him at the In Utero sessions. We'll never know for sure to what extent the pedal was used on the album or if it even was ever used at all, but this pedal does a really great job of getting those grimy, dark fuzz tones that are very reminiscent of In Utero. I've been honored to review and demo 3 Nirvana pedals, and this one is my favorite one so far. Next up is my vintage Sans amp. This is actually a very early amp modeler, way before amp sims were even a thing, but Kurt used it strictly as a distortion pedal. It was his main distortion on the In Utero tour, and it's been said that it's also all over the In Utero album. Kurt's JB Mustangs going through a Sans amp is my favorite guitar tone of all time. My Russian Big Muff. It's known that Kurt used a Big Muff while recording Lithium, but which exact Big Muff is a huge debate. I got this one because there is a Butch Vig quote where he said he brought his own Russian Big Muff to the Nevermind sessions, and he hinted that Kurt might have used that. But since I've started using this pedal in my content, it's been pointed out to me that the original Russian Big Muffs did not come out until 1992, so it'll probably always be a mystery which exact Big Muff model Kurt used on Nevermind, but I'm really happy with my Russian Big Muff. It serves me perfectly for the tones I'm looking for and does a great job at Lithium in particular. 1993 DoD FX69 grunge pedal, the same exact model that Kurt used for 7 shows on the In Utero tour. And yes, he did actually have one, and he did actually use it. What's really funny is I have an entire pedal history video out about it where I show audio and video of him using it, and the thumbnail is him literally physically turning it on. And even just as of a few days ago, I'm still getting comments from people saying he never used one. Kind of baffling, to be honest. Boss DM2W, the modern Wazacraft reissue of the delay pedal Kurt used early on in the pre-bleach era, notably on If You Must and Love Buzz. MXR Phase 100, the modern reissue of the pedal that Kurt used on Curmudgeon. Nirvana's X pedal, their amazing take on the insanely rare Pedal X that Kurt Cobain borrowed from Steve Albini during the In Utero sessions, notably for Heart-Shaped Box. I put off trying to recreate the Heart-Shaped Box tone for a long time because I knew I didn't have anything that would get me close to that solo sound, but this pedal solved that problem. It completely nails the Heart-Shaped Box sound. Last in my chain is what I consider probably one of my top most important pedals for Nirvana tones. Mesa Boogie 5-band EQ pedal. The pedal version of the onboard EQ that is famously on the Mesa Boogie Studio Pre that Kurt used heavily. I haven't had this pedal for that long, but it has made a world of difference. I feel like it's gotten my tones from almost all the way there to basically all the way there. I regret taking so long to experiment and play around with EQ pedals. It's really like a secret weapon on your pedal board. Playing around with EQ pedals can really help you change and shape your sound. Now we're on to my last pieces of Nirvana gear, my 2 amps. First up is my 1970s Randall Commander 2, RG120-212. This is the combo amp version of the Randall 2 head that Kurt used at various points throughout his career. Notable uses are the Dale demo, the Love Buzz sessions, and the In Utero sessions. This amp physically is super heavy, and I got mine for a great price locally on Facebook Marketplace, but it has a consistent hum. I really need an amp tech to check it out to get rid of that, but I love this amp a lot nonetheless. I can't go very loud with my current living situation, but when I do play through it, it's 100% that Dale demo sound. My last piece of gear is easily my most important gear purchase I have ever made. My Fender Tone Master Twin Reverb, what I use in 98% of my videos here on my channel. Kurt was known to love Fender Twins. He used one for the majority of Bleach, used one on Unplugged, for a handful of live shows, and it's also been said that it was his favorite and primary songwriting amp he used at home. I initially got this amp 3 years ago, and I thought it would just be a stepping stone. I was trying to recreate the Bleach tone specifically, so I thought to myself, I'll recreate the Bleach tone, get as close as I can, record it, make some videos about it, and then I'll sell it and use that money to get a Mesa Boogie Studio Pre, because that's the Kurt amp, so I'm not going to want a twin for long. That was my thought process then. So I recreated the Bleach tones, got really close to it, then as I tried to play around trying to get other studio and live tones, I found out very quickly that damn, a Fender Twin can get near every Nirvana tone, studio and live. That's why I never sold it, why I still have it today, why it's still my primary amp, because it just gets near every tone I've thrown at it. Plus, having the ability to record direct has really been my saving grace. My channel would not be a thing without that. I share walls with neighbors, I have 2 very young daughters, so I cannot get very loud very often. And the few times I can get loud, it's not even that loud. I think on my Randall, the highest I've gone on the master volume is 1.5, maybe 2. So this twin and its direct out are the reason my Nirvana Guitars channel is even a thing. That's why I say it's my most important gear purchase. And that's it. I know this was a really long video, so thank you so much for sticking it out to the end. And not to get sappy, pun intended, before I started taking my content seriously and uploading weekly back in 2022, I would maybe get 1 guitar a year. But because of my channel and all the support you guys have shown me by subscribing and viewing and sharing and commenting, my channel has put me in a place where I can reinvest back into my videos, which is why you've seen my guitar collection grow so rapidly in a short amount of time. I do not take it for granted at all. The reason I have all these beautiful guitars behind me is because of you guys and the support you show me. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I truly have the best job in the world. I basically just get to be a nerd on the internet about a very specific niche, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. As I've always said, the collection is always growing and never complete. Thank you so much for being along for the journey, and I hope you continue to stick around because I'm so excited to see what 2025 will bring. I have a few builds in mind that I really hope to get to this year, but let me know in the comments which guitars you really want to see that I haven't presented on my channel yet. Thank you so much for watching, and an extra special shout out to my Patreon supporters. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Nirvana Guitars, and check out my other Nirvana gear videos right here on YouTube.